When we're young, there's this strong belief that family will always be there for us. It's comforting to think that our kids, our siblings, even our spouse, will somehow always stay close, always ready to lend a hand when we get older. But what if that's not the case? What if life takes a turn, and one day you find yourself standing alone? The truth is, life doesn't always follow the script we imagined. I was recently reading a report that said over 3 million older people in the UK now live completely on their own. That's nearly 30% of the elderly population, and that number's climbing every single year. So statistically speaking, there's a good chance that either you or I, or someone we love, is going to be living alone in their later years. And let me tell you a little personal story. My aunt, her name's Margaret, she's 92 now. She lost her husband, Charles, more than 15 years ago. And ever since, she's been living independently. She has a couple of kids, but they're scattered across different parts of the country, busy with their own lives, their own careers, raising their own families. Margaret has built a life where she doesn't depend on anyone. And looking at her, I realize something important. If we want our later years to be happy, peaceful, and fulfilling, we can't simply hope others will always be there. We need to prepare ourselves properly, deliberately, starting today. Now, it's easy when you're in your 40s or 50s to assume you'll have a built-in support system forever. You think, oh, my kids will check in, or my siblings will be around. Maybe even, my spouse and I will always have each other. But if you think about it, kids move on. They create their own families, often miles or even countries away. Spouses, heartbreakingly, pass away. Siblings have their own challenges to deal with. Friends scatter. The older you get, into your 60s, 70s, and beyond, the clearer it becomes that family isn't guaranteed. If they're there, wonderful. But if not, you still need to be okay. You need to build a life that's rich, independent, and joyful, no matter what. That's why I developed something I call my 6-pillar operating system, or 6POS for short. It's the foundation that keeps my life strong and meaningful without depending on anyone else. I started working on this system back in my early 50s, long before I thought I would need it. And now, entering my 60s, I can tell you, it's one of the best things I ever did for myself. Today, I'm going to walk you through these 6 pillars. They're simple but powerful. They're the real safety net you can trust after 60. They are your true support system, far more reliable than simply hoping someone else will be there for you. And just so you know, I'll be going through the pillars in a very particular order, saving the most important one for last. So stick with me until the end, because that last pillar, it's the one everything else rests on. All right, let's dive into it. Pillar 1, physical health. Your body is the foundation. I'm starting with this because, frankly, if you don't have your health, the rest of it doesn't matter. When I was in my late 30s and 40s, I took my body for granted. Too much processed food, too many late nights, not enough movement. I always figured I'll deal with it later. Well, let me tell you, later shows up a lot faster than you expect. A few years ago, I had a bit of a wake-up call. I had to undergo surgery to have my gallbladder removed. And that whole experience, the hospital stays, the slow recovery, made me realize just how fragile things can get if you're not careful. It wasn't just the surgery itself, it was the months afterward, rebuilding strength, regaining stamina. It humbled me. Today, I prioritize my physical health like my life depends on it, because it does. I don't mean running marathons or punishing yourself at the gym, either. For me, it's about the basics. I strength train 3 times a week. Nothing crazy, just keeping my muscles engaged, keeping my body functional. I aim to get at least 7,000 steps every single day. Not by planning elaborate hikes, simply by weaving movement into daily life. Walking to the store, taking the stairs, strolling around the block after dinner. And nutrition, that's a big one. I shifted away from heavy processed foods and towards a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, and good proteins. I don't obsess, but I'm mindful because what you eat feeds your brain and your body. The goal isn't just to avoid disease. The goal is vitality. You want to be the person who can still travel, still walk unaided, still garden, still dance when you're 80 or 90 years old. not the one stuck indoors, trapped by a body that failed too soon. If you're listening to this right now, and you know you've been putting health on the back burner, hear me. It's not too late. Start small. Walk 10 minutes a day. Swap one unhealthy meal for something nourishing. Build from there. Your future self is begging you to take your health seriously. Today, Pillar 2, mental flexibility, keeping your mind open. Now let's talk about the second pillar, and it's just as crucial, your mindset. Look, aging is inevitable, but becoming rigid, closed-minded, out of touch, that's optional. I've seen so many people, good people, slowly shrink their world as they get older. They stop learning. They resist change. They scoff at new technology, new ideas, new ways of living. And before they know it, they're trapped inside a very small, very lonely world. I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for you. One of the things I committed to in my 50s was staying mentally flexible, learning something new every month, even if it's small, exploring new tools, whether that's learning how to use a smartphone better, dabbling in video editing, or even understanding a bit of cryptocurrency, not because I want to invest, but because it's part of the world now. When I come across a new concept or something I don't understand, I don't dismiss it. I jot it down in my notes app on my phone and look up later. I stay curious. If you don't use your brain, it's just like your muscles. It atrophies. It gets weaker. But when you keep learning, questioning, experimenting, your mind stays sharp, adaptable, and alive. And honestly, isn't that how you want to be remembered? As someone engaged with life right to the very end? Technology, culture, even the way we communicate, all of it will keep evolving. Don't be left behind. Lean in. Adapt. Stay open. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Now moving on to the third pillar. And this one's close to my heart. It's about purpose and passion. Because let's be honest, if you don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, if you don't feel like you're still contributing something meaningful, life can start to lose its flavor pretty quickly. I've seen it happen time and again. People retire, they throw themselves a little party, maybe take a trip or two, and then silence. The days start to blur. The excitement fades. They feel invisible, useless, like their best chapters are already behind them. But here's the thing, those chapters are only blank because they haven't written them yet. Retirement is not an ending. It's just a new beginning. You don't stop mattering when you stop working. You don't stop contributing. You just shift the way you do it. And if you do it right, this can be the most creative, most fulfilling phase of your life. When I stopped working full-time, I knew I had to find new passions to fill the space that work had occupied for so long. For me, it became about creating. I started writing more. I explored photography, something I'd always been curious about, but never had time to dive into. Eventually, I even dipped my toes into video making, which led to this very channel you're watching today. You don't need to start a business or write the next great novel, unless you want to, of course. Passion can be anything. Volunteering at a community center, mentoring young people, learning to paint, building model ships, anything that lights you up inside. It doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to matter to you. I often think about the famous study done by Bronnie, who worked with people in palliative care. She documented the top regrets of the dying, and right near the top of that list was, "I wish I hadn't worked so hard." Not because work itself was bad, but because they missed out on the passions, the relationships, the adventures they could have pursued instead. Don't let that be you. Find your passion now, while there's still so much time left to enjoy it. You still have blank pages to fill. And trust me, the story you can write in your 60s, 70s, and even 80s can be every bit as vibrant, if not more so, than anything that came before. And that brings me naturally to the fourth pillar, prosperity and financial security. Now, I know prosperity sounds like a big, fancy word, maybe even a little intimidating. But in this context, prosperity simply means this: having enough financial freedom that you can live on your own terms. It's not about being rich. It's not about driving a Bentley or living in a mansion. It's about not lying awake at night worrying about bills. It's about knowing that you have enough to meet your needs, pursue your interests, and maintain your independence without relying on anyone else. Because let's face it, financial stress is corrosive. It seeps into every part of your life. It affects your health, your relationships, your peace of mind. And in later life, when you're supposed to be enjoying the fruits of decades of hard work, the last thing you want is to feel trapped because you didn't plan ahead. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't always get it right when it came to money. In my 30s and 40s, I wasted plenty on things that didn't really matter. But somewhere around my early 50s, my wife Laura and I had a long, honest talk about what we wanted our future to look like. We realized that the less we needed, the freer we could be. So we made some deliberate choices. We downsized, sold the big, sprawling house that was more maintenance than joy once the kids moved out. We shifted to a smaller, cozier home that costs far less to run and keeps us closer to the heart of the community. We also started simplifying our lifestyle. We didn't cut out the things we loved, like travel or the occasional nice dinner, but we became much more mindful about spending. It's amazing how freeing it is to realize you don't need to keep up with anyone anymore. You're not competing. You're not trying to impress. You're just living simply, happily, within your means. And for a little fun on the side, and to keep some cash flowing, I took up buying and selling collectible books and vintage toys. I love treasure hunting at local markets and flipping rare finds on eBay. Sometimes it's just a few pounds profit. Sometimes it's a small windfall. But more than the money, it gives me a sense of engagement, of creativity. And yes, a little extra padding for the savings account never hurts. Here's the big thing I want you to hear. Financial independence doesn't necessarily mean you never work again. It means you get to choose what you do and who you do it for. If you still want to take on a project, fantastic. If you want to volunteer, even better. But you're not forced into anything just to keep the lights on. You live life on your terms. And that, to me, is the real definition of prosperity. Now let's move on to the fifth pillar, one that often gets overlooked, but is absolutely vital for true happiness. This pillar is about spiritual and philosophical strength. Now don't worry, when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about religion necessarily. I'm not here to preach, and I'm certainly not telling anyone what to believe. In fact, I'm not particularly religious myself. But what I have found, and what I know many others find too, is that having some sense of connection to something bigger than yourself is essential for emotional peace as you age. It could be nature. It could be the universe. It could be a quiet personal faith. It could even be the timeless wisdom passed down from ancient thinkers. The point is, when you have a way of seeing yourself as part of a bigger picture, it gives your life a kind of grounding, a calmness, a perspective that money and achievements alone can't provide. One of my favorite ways to tap into this pillar is simple. I go on long solo walks, especially out in nature. Just being under the open sky, listening to the wind through the trees, noticing the changing seasons. It does something to you. It strips away the noise. It reminds you how small you are, but also how connected you are to everything around you. There's a little park near where I live, a quiet, often overlooked green space with winding trails and an old stone bridge. I'll often grab a cup of coffee, leave my phone in my pocket, and just walk for an hour or so. Not trying to think about anything in particular, just letting my mind breathe. Those walks have become my church, my therapy, my meditation. Another thing that's been really meaningful for me is reading ancient texts. Over the past few years, I found myself diving into the writings of philosophers like Lao Tzu, Marcus Aurelius, and Confucius. There's so much timeless wisdom there, lessons about resilience, about humility, about living a good life no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. One book I particularly love is called The Path by Michael Poot, a professor from Harvard. It's about how ancient Chinese philosophy can be applied to modern life, and it's incredibly grounding. It reminds me that happiness isn't about chasing constant excitement. It's about cultivating small, meaningful habits, day after day. It's about finding beauty in the ordinary, about showing kindness even when nobody notices, about being present. When you develop this spiritual or philosophical foundation, life becomes less frightening. Aging becomes less frightening. Loss becomes less frightening. Because you realize you're part of a bigger story, one that stretches far beyond the boundaries of your own little life. And that perspective, it makes everything easier to bear. It makes joy deeper. It makes sorrow lighter. It makes solitude feel sacred rather than lonely. If you don't already have a spiritual or philosophical practice, now's the perfect time to explore one. Not for anyone else's approval, just for your own peace of mind. And that brings us to the sixth and final pillar, your social circle. Now, let me be clear about this. After 60, relationships matter more than ever, but not just any relationships. The right relationships. I'm not talking about collecting hundreds of acquaintances on Facebook or trying to maintain a wide network of shallow connections. I'm talking about cultivating a small, tight-knit group of people you genuinely care about, and who care about you in return. Because here's the harsh truth, loneliness kills. Study after study has shown that chronic loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases your risk of heart disease, dementia, depression, and early death. When family support becomes less reliable, when kids are busy, spouses pass away, siblings move away, friends can become your chosen family. But you have to be deliberate about it. Good friendships don't just happen by accident. They take effort, nurturing, and most importantly, shared experiences. When I was younger, I had dozens of casual friends. After a night out, I could barely remember who I talked to or what we'd laughed about. It was fun, sure, but it was shallow. Now, in my 60s, I can count my true friends on one hand. And that's exactly the way I want it. These are the people who I know would show up for me without being asked. The ones I can talk to about anything, the good, the bad, the messy. And they know they can do the same with me. There's no judgment, no keeping score. Just mutual respect, affection, and trust. One of the ways I've built and maintained these friendships is by actively engaging in things I love and finding other people who love them too. For instance, I joined a local photography group a few years back. Not because I desperately needed new friends, but because I wanted to deepen a passion. The friendships that grew out of that happened naturally. They were rooted in shared joy, not obligation. Another example is starting this YouTube channel. Through creating content and engaging with people who share similar values, I've built connections that genuinely enrich my life. Some of those connections have even turned into real-world friendships, which is something I never expected, but am deeply grateful for. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't really have anyone like that, don't panic. It's never too late. Join a book club, take a cooking class, volunteer for a cause you believe in. You don't have to network or try to impress anyone. Just show up, be curious, be kind, and let real connections form naturally over time. And one more thing, when building your circle, make sure you're surrounding yourself with positive, uplifting people. People who energize you, who believe in you, who respect you. Life is too short to spend time with those who drain your spirit or make you feel less than you are. Protect your energy fiercely. Choose your people wisely. And invest in those relationships wholeheartedly. Because at the end of the day, no matter how independent you are, no matter how strong your pillars are, we all need someone to walk the road with us, even if it's just a few trusted companions. So now that we've walked through all 6 pillars, physical health, mental flexibility, passion, prosperity, spirituality, and true friendships, there's one last thing I need to say, and it's probably the most important message in this entire video. You have to build these pillars before you desperately need them. I can't stress that enough. You can't wait until crisis hits. You can't wait until loneliness creeps in or illness forces your hand. These pillars are like planting trees. You plant them today so they can shelter you years from now. You start building strength before the storm comes, not in the middle of it. If you're in your 40s or 50s, now is the perfect time to start. If you're already in your 60s or 70s, that's still okay. But you need to start today, not tomorrow, not next year, today. The good news is even small steps make a difference. A 15-minute walk, a new hobby, a friendly hello to someone you see regularly, a few minutes of reflection in nature, a new note in your phone about something you want to learn. These tiny actions build momentum. Over time, they create a life that doesn't just survive, it thrives. And here's the beautiful thing. When you strengthen these pillars, not only do you make your own life better, but you also become a source of strength for others. Your independence, your energy, your example, it ripples outward. You inspire your kids, your friends, even strangers you meet along the way. You show the world that aging isn't about shrinking. It's about expanding into wisdom, into freedom, into real, lasting joy. So as you finish watching this today, I want to leave you with a question. Which pillar do you feel strongest in right now? And which one needs a little more love and attention? Leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this helpful, maybe share it with someone else who's starting to think about their future too. You never know whose life you might impact just by sending a little encouragement their way. Remember, family is a blessing, but they are not a plan. You are your own best safety net. And the life you build, with your own 2 hands, with your own 2 feet, that's the life that will carry you forward, strong and steady, no matter what. Thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of your body, nurture your mind, follow your passions, protect your peace, cherish your friendships, and above all, live life on your terms. See you in the next video.